a couple seconds before it says we're live, so I'm guessing we're live right about now. And I'm just going to get to where I can see you and see everybody. Yay, here we are. We are live. Jacob, hello. I can see you. I can see everyone out there. And wait, it's still not working. I hate technology. All right. Are you still there? Can I see you now? I'm going to go back over here. All right, we are live. I'm just looking for the little live thingy on here and we can make this happen. Oh, come on. All right, we are ready to go. Hey everyone, I'm live today as promised with Jacob Nordby and so excited. Jacob, welcome and hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so excited to have you here. I had so much fun in our interview. I've had so much fun reading your books. And I have so many questions for you. I know a bunch of people said they were going to pop on, so I'm sure they are finding us. But in the meantime, I wanted to thank you. And I thought if you're up to it, we could start with a little bit of a visualization because you gave us a beautiful meditation in the episode. And I need one of those right now. Are you down with it?
I'm down. I
All
can
right.
do that as well. And let me just say, as we're preparing ourselves to enter this space together, that wherever you are, yesterday I was feeling a lot of stress as I was driving, and I have so many pressures. My email box is full of needs and requests, and traffic was something, and I was just feeling a lot of pressure. So if you can relate to that sense of anxiety, or that sense of, maybe it's not even in your mind as the word anxiety, you can just feel your whole body like feeling like it's kind of buzzing with electricity and feeling like you got to move faster, faster, faster. It's hard to keep up. And one thing I've noticed is that there's often this internal message that's being played over and over again, not necessarily these words, but the feeling, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I can't do this. I can't keep up. Right. And so one thing I've noticed when I start to feel that happen in my body, um, that becomes this flag, this alert flag. Hey, remember who you really are. Remember where your strength is. Remember where the energy that you need to move through all of this is. So if today, if you're a mother dealing with all kinds of needs from kids who might be sick at home from school, or you're running between appointments, or you're just feeling really frantic and hurried, and maybe that's coming out as some feelings of real anger or aggression toward other people, and you don't understand because it doesn't feel like, this is not who I am. Let's just all of us together, unless you're driving or skydiving or something, as long as you feel safe, I would just invite you to close your eyes with me and take a nice deep breath. And as we do this, I'd like you to bring your attention to the top of your head and just notice there's a still place on top of your head. And it's an amazing faculty that you have to use your attention and place it wherever you want to, which means that you have the power to go inward. You have the power to find a still place. I'd like to invite you to breathe again. And as you breathe in, imagine that all of those things sparking throughout your body that feel like hurry and feel like frustration and feel like I'm not enough. Just imagine that your breath can make this warm glow inside of your chest, and it becomes this magnet, and it's drawing all of those feelings to it. And as you breathe in deeper, and now just imagine as you're breathing out that all of those feelings are like smoke that just kind of breathes out. Let's do that again. Breathe in and imagine that you're creating this magnet that's pulling all of those feelings, the ones that aren't comfortable, the ones that make you feel you're not enough. Breathe in and hold those, and now breathe out. And now as you breathe in one more time, let's do that. Just imagine that any little bits and pieces and wisps of those feelings are able to be collected. And now breathe them out and watch them just float away gently on the breeze. And as you breathe in again, bring your attention into the center of your chest. And notice as you breathe in and out, just naturally, no effort, Just notice how you can enter a place of stillness, a place of greater peace. And as you allow yourself to settle into that, just notice where you're sitting and your feet on the floor. Maybe put your hands on your knees and move them around just a little bit, breathing in and out naturally, and bringing your attention back to your center place right near your heart. And I want you to imagine that each breath makes a glow get a little bit brighter, it begins to expand a little bit more. You notice your shoulders relax. You notice that your neck is feeling a little bit more relaxed. You notice that the muscles around your eyes have loosened their tension in your forehead and your ears and your cheeks and your jaw, breathing naturally. And as you do this, just know that you have on purpose made a little place of peace for yourself, a little place of calm. And just know that in this place, as that glows a little bit larger, so it's filling your whole body, in this place, all of the energy you need, all of the responses, the loving responses, the wise responses you need, come from this place. Everything you need, the answers that you need for the next thing that's coming up is right here. And as you breathe, moving your fingers again a little bit, and allowing yourself just to hold this as you open your eyes and rejoin us in this room with so much gratitude for yourself, for who you really are at your center place. Just breathing.
Ah, I so needed that, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I hope everybody else liked it, but I don't even care. I'm taking that one for me.
Yes.
I so needed that. Thank you. And thanks everyone who tuned in. I hope you guys all enjoyed that as well. So on the episode, we talk about so many things. Don't want to do too many repeats because I want people to tune into that as well. But I do have some questions for you that we kind of didn't get to. And one question that we started to get to, but I don't think you ever answered it, is where did the book come from? Where did how did you become the guy who wrote this book? Or either of the books, because I've gone back and read Blessed Are the Weird since we last talked too, and I'm a fan.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I didn't have a copy of this until a friend let me borrow it again. My very first book was The Divine Arsonist.
Okay.
Awakening. And I'm holding that up right now, not to pitch a book. It feels like a different lifetime when I wrote that book back in 2010 through 2012. But when you say, where did this come from? I didn't know it at the time, Victoria, but I was going through this deep process of recreating, finding out who I really was. And that was a big theme in the first book, was surrender. It was remember who you really are. And the second book, Blessed Are the Weird, was kind of this self-discovery, self-acceptance, like, oh, wow, who I really am is this very unique creature, very unique. And there were so many parts that were buried, so many authentic, genuine parts buried under expectations and the shell that I had built up around myself, as we all do. And when I refer to this as me, I like to share that with anyone who feels that way also. Like, this really isn't just about me, it's about us. Anybody who has the hunger to come into who they really are. And so when the publisher asked me to write The Creative Cure, I really asked deeply to be guided to a book that would be less how-to, but a guidebook to give some really practical practices, tools, experiences to know how to reconnect to the authentic, loving, genius, powerful parts of ourselves. So that's where that came from, was kind of this progression of how I see it. Anyone who begins to really wake up and want to long for, the question isn't big and esoteric, really. It's just when we wake up and go in the middle of the night and go, I want more for my life. I want more for myself. I feel limited by the life that I've created around me. I feel maybe even like a victim to some things, like I'm stuck and I can't get out of it. Anytime anyone has that impulse my God, I know how that feels. I know how hopeless and desperate it can feel at times to think that, oh my God, can I ever recreate a life that feels good and true and real to me after spending so many years having my strings pulled by society, by expectations, by who I thought I was, by the things that developed through traumas, you know? So that's where that book came from.
I love it. And we talked about this in the show a little bit, but you think creativity, you think drawing, painting, writing, but it's not. Creativity is it's life. It's how we express ourselves, right? It's how your soul expresses itself and how it creates everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you agree with that. I don't know. Tell me if you don't.
Hey.
And so I love the book because the book will be great if you are a quote unquote, traditionally creative person and you want to write or you want to journal or you want to do stuff. And Jacob gives really, really good pointers in doing all of those things. But I also think it's a healing book.
Hmm.
I also think, and it reminds me because you have a big summit. Is that what you call it? Is the summit coming up? And we're going to have all that information as always in the comments. But it's called Heal and Create. And so it's 1 week and you could probably speak to it better than I can, but it looks to me it's 1 week of healing, 1 week of creating. But they're like this, right? I mean, that creative, this book is a book for self-healing and self, creation, I guess. I don't know. I'm gonna zip it and get your thoughts.
Yours, don't zip it. You're saying it beautifully. And I mean that to me, Victoria, what became such a important thing when I began to work with people. And I would watch, in fact, the second book, Blessed Are the Weird, a manifesto for creatives. And that it kind of kept that idea alive that creatives are these very special people. And I noticed some of the feedback in my own heart as I began to feel into creating another book. It's like there was this hunger in my people around me and my friends. My own brother looked at me wistfully one time and he said, I'm just not that creative. And then I walked through this office that we had started this company many years ago, and he was leading this company. And there were these teams of software developers, and he sat down at his screens, Victoria, in front of 3 screens. And to me, it looks like the Matrix code, it's computer code. And I noticed his posture change when he sat down in front of it. Was like watching a virtuoso sit down to a grand piano. Like you can just feel them move into a different zone. That's what happened to him. And I put my hand on his shoulder. I was getting a little bit emotional about this because it's such a hunger for me to see people. I don't have their answers, but I live for the moments when they find their own answers.
Right.
And I put my hand on my brother's shoulder. I said, what I'm seeing you do it's like the technological version of somebody playing Mozart or somebody writing Mozart. And he had this aha moment. And I've seen that in so many different things in life. Our lives are meant to be artful. Our lives are meant to be filled with, as you just said, the expression of who we really are. And that's not just one category, like what we think of as creativity. It's our home, it's our relationships, it's our work.
Right. And so everything in this book can apply to that too. Yeah, I love that. And I think I don't know if I talked about this in the episode, but a little bit before our interview, I had done a reading on the show. And it came up for this woman, what are you doing creatively? And immediately she goes to, well, I'm not an artist, I'm not a painter, and I'm not a writer, but she was a life coach and she was creating these wonderful classes and programs for her, her students, for her people. And I was like, that's creative, right? How is that not creative? If you're a social media campaign, that's creative. Anytime we express ourselves and create something, that is in fact creative. And it's so important. But I also, again, think that act of creation, when you find, like you said with your brother, when you find your sweet spot, when you find that place when you're in the flow, I mean, that's what life is for, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really,
And I want to say too that sometimes it's easy if we developed skills that become a work we do for pay and actually do gain mastery. So that becomes that's a creative expression.
right.
Sometimes it's easy though to feel um, limited to that being the only thing.
Right.
And my brother right now is in the process of stepping out and really stepping into the unknown, because he told me the other day, he's like, I don't yearn to write a book, or his wife's an artist and creates really amazing, pictures and sculptures and things. And he said, I don't have this yearning like you or Jenny to create something like that and share it with the world. But he said, I have a yearning to create a homestead that's off grid and it's sustainable and it's all these things. And he said, I can feel that I'm being called to step into what it means to create that. And I love that, because it wasn't just his one outlet was computer coding, for example. And so I'm sharing this to say that any of us who are here today, if you feel yourself being called into the unknown, and it feels uncertain, you're not sure what's next or how you'll do it, that is most likely your inner self saying, there's more for you here. You are much more than just this one or two thing.
Yeah, and to expand in that area, because oftentimes our intuition calls us into those places of the unknown, because that's when we can stretch and grow.
Yes.
Yes. And sometimes they get uncomfortable, but
My God, so uncomfortable.
yeah, that's where yours truly is right now. But it'll stretch again. No, but I think it's really true. And I think too, there's something to be said, especially for those who aren't quote unquote artistic, and we're all artistic and we're all creative. And I'm sure you would agree with that. But those of us who haven't thought of ourselves in that box, I think traditional artsy things can actually be really freeing. Now, I've been like a creative or identified as a creative my whole life, but I know people that haven't, drawing, painting, writing, it can be very freeing, especially because I think if you think of yourself as a creative in that artsy sense, you have these expectations.
Right.
And I think people that don't, sometimes it's fabulous because it can be so freeing to move into an area where you can create something without the expectation of how it has to be. Right. Which we should be, there's no shoulds, but which is nice to be doing all the time. But I do think for some people, it can be so freeing to be like, well, I'm not really good at drawing, but like, boy, it's fun to draw.
Right. Well, and I think that is, wow, that's a key. Julia Cameron talks a lot about what would I do if I didn't have to do it perfectly? She actually in her workshops, a lot of times will have people write a list, 1 to 10. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, I would, and fill in that blank 10 times. In fact, I'd invite everyone here today, go ahead and make that list. If I didn't have to do it perfectly, and the value of returning to a childlike way before we knew that we had to do it well, or that we had to do it good enough to be sold in the marketplace and make a career out of it, before we knew that we had to become these things. We didn't care. We drew, we danced poorly, we sang poorly, poorly by adult standards, but it's so beautiful. And to your point, we're learning more and more. Science and research is now demonstrating the therapeutic value of doing those things, and not necessarily to be displayed or shared even, although it's wonderful to do that, but especially for people who feel stymied or like their work is never going to be good enough, or not as good as that other person they see on Instagram who has 25,000 followers and everybody loves everything they do. It's like, what if you didn't have to do it even that well? What if you just did it for the joy? And we're finding out now, therapists are discovering so much about how that really is a tremendously healing experience, and it touches other parts of life too.
Absolutely. Because I think, and I talk about this a lot, we're not tuned in, we're not taught to follow our joy.
Right.
Or, a lot of times you'll ask someone, well, what excites you and what lights you up? They don't know, because they've been taught to follow what they think they should. We lose touch with that when we can get back in touch with that, because that's your inner GPS, right? What excites you and what you're curious about, that's what lights your soul on fire. And so sometimes we have to be able to move into that imperfect range and just do things that are, out of our comfort zone, or just silly. I remember a coach years ago telling me, and it really stuck. She's like, it was in another growth period, and she said, like, you need to spend a third of your day doing things that are superfluous. That's the word that she used. Right? Doing things that don't have a purpose. And I realized, Jacob, that everything I did for a purpose. If I went for a walk, I put it in the exercise and the stress relief box, right? If I played in my pool, I labeled it like play or exercise. I gave everything a purpose, like as if I couldn't, if I was lying down on a lounge chair in the sun, I was resting.
Right.
And, it's not about that, right? It's about, and I'm finding that now in my own life, living alone for the first time, where I have nobody to answer to, nobody but me. And, asking that question, what do I feel like doing right now? It's a little bit of a loaded question, right? Like, I got to give myself permission. Like, I can have dinner, at 3 o'clock, and I can eat whatever I want because I don't, but a lot of us, like, I feel too like it's strange because I thought I was really good at it, but then you learn. It can sometimes be a little bit challenging, for us to listen to our joy and follow those inclinations because we have so much conditioning that says it's not safe, it's not okay, like, don't do that. So
Hey, so I'd love to just, you said something that when I'm with clients, oftentimes something will come out in conversation. It's like this dangling thread. I'm like, oh,
uh-oh.
I need to pull that. No, but earlier you said, and I just loved that you were willing to like say it, out here in public. And obviously, if you're comfortable or you don't want to, it's fine either way. But I'm just curious if you're willing to talk a little bit more about, earlier we said something about the uncertainty of stepping into the unknown, creating something more, and how uncomfortable it was. And you said, yeah, and we stretch and grow, and you're like, and oh my God, is that happening to me? And then we moved on. I'm curious if you're willing to talk more about that, because I think there's some like juicy stuff there.
What do you want me to say?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
I
mean,
just think a lot of
yeah, no, people that follow me know, in the last year I moved cross country, changing the way I'm living, who I'm living with. So right now I'm on my own, starting a new business. I just bought property to build a retreat center. So, so I got a lot on my plate.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of it for me was intuitively guided. So it was really like somebody mentioned, "Hey, I think you'd be really happy in California," and all of a sudden I was like, yeah, it's time. And, it was that deep knowing. I'm not regretting it or anything like that yet. But it's when we take these big leaps, and Victoria takes big leaps, apparently. I'm catching up to myself. I really am. But I also think, when I say follow your inclinations and follow your intuition, by all means, you do not have to pick up and move across country. That is my special sauce and the thing that I felt called to do. But it can be like, hey, I feel like taking the day off of work and going to the beach right now. You can start there. It's okay.
Well,
um,
I love that you're willing to share. And of course, you have, as you say, you've shared, people who've been following, that all these things.
yeah.
But I want to just bring a little attention to that, because again, sometimes it can feel like um, there's this sort of pedestal or special place we put in our minds. It's like, oh, when I'm creating something, I'll be in the flow. And the truth is, um, anytime we're out of the known, which means we're not in our usual patterns, the way that we had been living our lives, it means it's kind of like the old vinyl records where now we're out of that track. We're actually creating new neural pathways in our brain, but it's not familiar. And sometimes with clients, they'll show up and they say, oh, my life's great, but I don't know why I'm feeling so, torn apart. And then we'll start talking about, and kind of like what you just described, there are these major changes. And I like to liken it to a table with four legs. And if you pull one leg of the table out, it's not too hard to keep it upright. Pull two out, now you have to spend some real energy. If you pull three of the legs out, all of a sudden it's a full-time job to keep that table level.
Right.
And so what I like to share with people is let's have a lot of compassion for ourselves as we're going through some kind of major change. If we've gone through a divorce, or we've moved into a new home, or we've started a new job, or we've left a job and we're not sure what's next, any one of those things by themselves is really deeply destabilizing to our psyche, to our sense of equilibrium. And this isn't preaching to you, Victoria. I just want to share, and I'm glad that you were willing to talk about it. Like, this is when we're called into a deeply creative experience of asking ourselves, who am I? What do I really desire? What would I love to create right now? And so beginning to understand that, first of all, there's nothing wrong with feeling completely turned inside out and afraid and freaked out whenever we move out of the groove that we've been living in, even if it was a good groove. My children are, I have one guy left at home and the other two have moved away. And I feel so much joy and pride and surprise, frankly. I'm like, I can't believe I didn't screw them up to the point where they couldn't do that. So I'm in love with the fact that they're more independent, but now all three of them don't any longer require me to be their caregiver and get them places and make their food and buy their socks and do all the things. And that was a big part of my identity for many, many years. And so it's been interesting to feel the discomfort of going, kind of like what you said earlier. It's like,
Right.
nobody needs me to be home tonight. What do I want to do now with this space,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's huge. You said so much in there, so much. And one thing that you said that I really loved too, which I'm definitely going to take to heart, is you don't have to be in the flow to create. Because I think too, so one of the things that I've been doing a lot right now to help with my own emotional health is coloring. So a lot of coloring. And thanks to Jen Colombo, who's watching, I got my unicorns are assholes and
I
yes,
love
and my Scooby-Doo coloring books, both from Amazon. So I was on it last night. And I'm coloring in the dark, like dark, just because it's usually in the evening and I like to keep the lights low. So I can't quite see what I'm doing, but boy, I'm watching my mind. Like I didn't really realize I was such a perfectionistic colorer, like, did I get Scooby-Doo's color right? Does this look good together? I mean, I'm freaking coloring with crayons in front of the TV, you know?
right.
Um, so it's been really, 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 really interesting all the ways that, the mind is like, this isn't good enough. But I'm also finding I'm creating a ton right now. I'm not loving it all, but it keeps wanting to come through. And that brings me to one of the questions that I have written down on my piece of paper here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference of creating from that kind of angsty place, which was my go-to through my childhood. I used to paint. I didn't bring any of those pictures up, but pretty horrifying things. People would look at me and like, you seem okay, but what the heck is like coming out of this little girl here? Um, because that was when I was really overwhelmed, because I had a pretty overwhelming childhood, just to share. And when it was particularly overwhelming, that was my refuge, and that was how I moved the energy. I also think, the podcast, a lot of the things that I do now are creating with inspiration and joy. So it's not digging down deep to that point of angst. What I'm experiencing now is like, that vacillation. So anyway, my question is sort of, what's the difference? Is there a difference? And I
Hmm.
don't know, is that a question?
Hmm. Well, it is because you asked it.
Yeah. That is a good point.
Wow, I love this. And I feel like that's one of the things that I came to in the Blessed Are the Weird book, was the realization of for myself also, Victoria, of this idea that I needed to be in some sort of intensity or pain or turmoil. Otherwise, I wasn't really touching that live wire, that source,
Yeah.
And I think that can be for a lot of artistic types, and for also the types who don't see themselves as artistic, partly because when they go that direction, they start to peel off the layers and they start to feel the raw stuff. So I don't feel like there's an either or answer to that. I feel like we definitely, going through intensity, when I went through a divorce and then years later had some more relationship things during those times of incredible turmoil internally, some poetry came out of me and some writing came out of me that I probably couldn't have got to other ways. But I also feel like sometimes there can be this self-sabotage tendency to go, I need to mess my life up. I almost said a swear word. I need to mess my life up right now so that I can, and that's usually very unconscious. We're not doing it at a conscious.
Right. No, absolutely.
You go and create chaos, because in chaos is when we start feeling that intensity again. And I have felt very much guided in my life to learn how to create from joy.
Yeah.
And of course, if life does come along and there's chaos, go with that energy as well, and understand how therapeutic creating can be in the middle of that. So that's certainly not a wrong thing. But when the idea is that, and that's why we see people like Kurt Cobain and all these different artists that we love so much, and they just had these sometimes really terrifying experiences of life and would sabotage themselves with drugs or with alcohol,
Right.
with whatever it was. Because I think that there probably was that, like, I need to be in constant chaos or I won't be creating anything real. And that I don't feel like is a true thing.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. And I do see that. And I think it goes back to people in general. We get used to the fuel that we're used to driving on, right?
Yeah.
And there are cleaner, better fuels, but if your fuel has been angst, which many of ours has, then you're going to keep thinking, oh, this is what I need to fill my tank with. This is the only gas there is, right? So yeah,
Well,
I see that.
Victoria, I mean, you mentioned your childhood, and I also um, didn't realize until just really a few years ago when I really started going deeply into this more healing aspect, that my anxiety set point was way high. So talk about not being able to sleep. Um, Talk about that sort of like my clock was just really moving too quickly all the time. And I felt like that was just like that actually felt like that's when I'm most creative. And then with a lot of help and some healing practices, watching that polyvagal curve, learning to come down into the green zone and not to interpret. I'm most creative when I'm feeling most frantic or most manic or whatever the term might be. It's actually kind of like the meditation we started with, very simple this morning, moving down into the green zone, moving down into that place. And now we have science and research to demonstrate to us what's happening, the chemicals that are being released, and the fact that by going there, we actually open our tunnel vision, which is what happens in fight or flight. We get tunnel vision. We actually open our tunnel vision and we begin to become actually much more receptive to intuitive direction, to resources, to ideas, to how to the things that will help us actually create the very best kinds of art. So I'm so glad that you're spending time here, because the myth that says I need to be in hyper focused, hyper tense sort of sense, that is actually a lie. Like best stuff is going to come from the most peaceful place.
I agree. And I think too, and again, I agree with you 1,000% when it needs to flow, because that's where you are, be where you are, be where you are, give yourself permission to be where you are. That's what I'm working on. But, but it's so important. But I also feel that when we create from angst, we're sending out more angst, right? And so when we create from love and joy, to the extent that we can get there naturally, we send that out too. And that brings me to my other question. And I think this is making me think of the creative arts, and I'm not watching the time either. So hopefully we haven't been talking for like 7 days. Yeah, I don't even know where to find the time. So sorry, friend, you'll just have to tell me when we're done. But one of the ways that I like to create, and again, not professionally, but just for fun, is painting. And I've been painting since I was a kid. And I know that when I paint, I move energy. That's the only way to describe it. It moves energy. And one of the things that I'm learning to do more and more now is to stop, it's in progress, stop worrying about how it looks, because it's actually the process of moving the paint around the canvas that's so healing for me. So I brought a painting that I've been working on, and again, been in a funky state. This is a couple layers of, right? But like, I don't know why I want to show that. It's not.
Wait a minute, I wasn't looking at it. Let me see it again.
But it's like, to me, it's energy, right? Anyway, so I just wanted to get what you thought about that. Not what you thought about the painting. Don't tell me what you thought about the painting. Don't want to know. But it's not why I'm doing it. But again, it's that moving of energy through our creations. And I just was curious what you think about that.
Is it okay if I say something about the painting?
You can say something about the painting.
No, I get that. No, it's like, no, I just want to reflect.
It's a couple days worth of layers of,
Well, it reminds me a lot of what Flora Bowley, who will be one of the instructors at the Heal Create retreat that's coming up starting Friday. She'll be leading people through some painting like that. And I've watched her helping people move energy around, as you say. And so that first glimpse, and that's why I said, no, show it to me again. It's like at first glance, I can feel how much energy is moving around, how much intensity. And I love that you're able to give it a physical expression, so it's no longer just these things inside. So that's all I had to say, except to say I loved it and thank you for showing it to me. But it's clear that it's potent and it's real, right? It's coming from that place. So I'm not sure what the question was that you asked right after that.
The question was just about moving energy through art, and I think you answered it, because I feel that we do that through everything that we create. I mean, I think everything we create, right, is an act of moving energy. But I was just thinking about it a lot with the artwork. So I was curious what you think. Now you're more of a writer. Is that your primary way of expression?
Well, it is, and it has been. But when I was a child, I played the violin and I sang and I did a lot
Okay.
of sketching. And what's interesting is how my my creative expression has mostly found the form of words, but I'm feeling myself called back to pick some of those things up and probably in the way that we're talking about it, not pick it up in a way of, okay, I need to get really good at this so then I can make that part of my career. I mean, sure, if it happens, that's great, but really even make the intention to stay out of that energy altogether. Like, let me learn to play the guitar because that's something I've always wanted to do. Because I know that I want to feel good. I know that that would feel really good. And there's a desire. And that's one thing I think if we can really pay attention to, Victoria, I was in conversation with somebody the other day. I think it was the client, and this came out. Your desires, your longings are your soul's map. Like, if we can begin to pay attention to what we yearn for, what we maybe even feel is impossible, but if we could begin to pay attention to it, I feel like that gets us a little closer. It's a step closer to intuition, to
Yes.
making, and sometimes it can feel so big, so far from where we currently are, that the other part of our adult mind just says, stop daydreaming, shut that down, grow up, you're wasting your time. But actually making time every day, or a little bit of time here and there even, just first of all, just be bored,
Yes.
just create empty space. There are Zen traditions that actually teach simple boredom, like not even meditating, kind of like you said earlier, not even going in the swim, going in the pool because it's, now I'm playing. It's like simply do nothing and
Right.
notice what shows up in the nothing. But to do that and to enter boredom, but then also to enter daydreaming.
Right.
One way that I've loved that this has helped me is to tell my adult brain, which is so very good at being an adult. But to tell my adult brain, hey, I'm going to take a recess for 5 minutes and I'm just going to daydream, and actually begin to reclaim a little bit of that capacity, that facility that we naturally had as children, to use our imaginations for things that would delight us. We got taught over time to use our imaginations for what we don't want.
Right.
Um, so to give ourselves, and that was the only way I could make that work, Victoria, was to give myself a 5-minute recess. And I told the adult part of my brain, I'll be back, and when I'm back, you're back in charge. But for
Right.
5 minutes, I'm on recess. And if for whatever reason that little device worked, and my adult brain was like, okay, all right, just so we're clear, I'm still the boss. Go have your
Right.
recess. And that was like this. Oh, and that was several years ago that I started that practice, and that began. Then I noticed that was when I began to become willing to dream again
Right.
a little bit.
I love that. And I think it's so important too, because sometimes we have that ping pong ball match with ourself, right? And every part of yourself is here to serve you. And every part of yourself, it learned how, your adult self learned how to do what it thought it was supposed to do. It's trying to help you,
Right.
your quote unquote adult self. Um, and so when we give ourselves permission, when we say, look, I love that you're doing this job, that's great, but hey, let's just, could you give me 5 minutes to try something new? I think it's a beautiful way to shift. I love it.
Well, and
um
as your folks won't be weirded out by this, but we're still in the energy of last night's new moon,
yes.
and so this is a really potent time to allow ourselves to plant some seeds of dreams, even small ones, without judging whether they're possible or anything. Just and go into the energy of what is it that I'm longing for here,
Yeah.
what am I really longing for, and be willing to. I use journaling to do that and write it out. But if you're not a journaler, make a list. Doesn't have to be a
Right.
journal thing. Just make a list, and all we're really doing is listening to ourselves and listening to our true desires, to our genuine longings,
Yeah.
begins to put us back in touch with the voice of our inner selves. We might call that our soul, might call it our authentic self, whatever we call it. That part of us that is larger than the lives we've created as adult humans wants to help guide us into a richer, fuller experience where when we finish up being here, and we stop, if we could stop for like 20 seconds before we pass on to whatever happens after we die, if we could stop for 20 seconds and look back, the who you really are, your greater inner self, really wants to make that a moment that where you could look back and say, I did what mattered to me. I created what mattered to me, you know?
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge. And I think that's the part of you that really we are all here to express. And we'll all get to it in varying degrees and varying amounts. But I like to think that a lot of the people that follow me, that follow you, are people that are right on the cusp of really wanting and being ready to express that so much more, because that's what the world needs right now.
Really
That's
good.
what the world needs right now. And that's what you need too, because it feels good. It
Feels good.
it feels really, 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 really good. And I think it's just a cooperation. I think sometimes too, you're making me think that as we start to expand, right? Sometimes with that expansion, with that, I have permission to do whatever I want right now, or I'm going to pursue this dream. You know, sometimes there is that little backlash. If we've learned it wasn't safe, if we've learned it's not okay. So be patient with yourself around that too. That's going back into my head. But
I, no, I love that.
be patient with yourself too, because sometimes, you know, those expansions, like, they stir stuff up, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not on the right path. It just means that, you know, hey, human. So
I love that. I mean, if there's one thing I would love to just repeat over and over again, is my sister was one of the first people in my life to say this to me. And it's be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And over time, I've come to see the inner self as not, I don't really call it inner child, but there is such an innocent inner part of us that also learned that the world is often not gentle, and it can feel like too much pressure, and it can feel like a lot. But to the degree that we're like, sometimes people will come to me and say, I need to hire you so you can kick my ass so I can get this book done or whatever. And I'm like,
right.
Okay, take a minute. Your creative self, your inner self, does not need its ass kicked. Your inner
Right.
self needs to be invited into a safe place where it is truly safe to remember who you are a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so powerful and so beautiful. And I think a lot of us have learned, right, that ass kicking is the way to go. And
Sure.
you just get bruised, my friends. You just get bruised. There's just no need to kick yourself. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever. I hope we'll have more opportunities. I'm going to make them even if we don't. But as we're wrapping up today, tell everybody about the retreat that's coming up, because I'm really excited to participate in that. And there's some amazing people in that. And so tell us what's that about, how it started, and what people can expect.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. I mean, your link to that will be in the show notes, no doubt, or in the comments.
Yeah, it'll be everywhere. It's
I
been
want to make sure
everywhere. It'll be more.
you get credit for bringing your folks, but no, I'm just so really, it's a lot like what we're doing today. It's inviting us into very specific practices and experiences of safety. And of what I really am excited about is using this retreat that spans 2 weeks. And people are like, 2 weeks? It's like, come to the live sessions that you can, and meet Julia Cameron and Victoria and me and Flora Bowley and Dr. Eck Meisel, all these wonderful people. We have a gentleman from Ireland, Barry McDonough, and he's an expert in addition to being like a therapist, but he's built this whole expertise around anxiety healing. And it's not just anxiety relief, it's actually healing where anxiety is coming from. And so I'm so excited to share him and all of our teachers. My God, Lisa McCourt, just all of our teachers who are showing up to share. But this can become a map of a creative practice where you begin to use these, not just go to an event, as I've seen people do so often, and I've done it. Go to an event, get inspired and excited, go home and fall right back into the same patterns, and then maybe go back to the event, the same event the next year for a refresher. This is meant to give you micro practices, little things you can do, kind of like the 2-minute meditation we did at the beginning of this, things you can do that actually bring you back into who you are, your healing self, your creative self, but then also helped move us out of the patterns, begin to even spot these are the things that the only reason they're still there is just that I'm just so accustomed to them. And so that's part of our intention with this, Victoria, is to share these things that can help us move out of those, spot them to begin with, and say, I want to create something more, something different, something that matches me better. And I think that as people meet each other in the private community that's offered through this and end up feeling safe and seen and realize they're not alone, the intention with that is that we gain courage by realizing that we are connected to other people who are likewise in this process of transformation, of becoming who we really are. And I love transformation. It's a big word, but really, to me, it's so simple. It's finding out who you really are, and then having the courage and the tiny steps to become more of that. It's like the acorn isn't supposed to become a bamboo,
Right.
and the caterpillar isn't supposed to become an eagle. Find out who you are, how you are made, and then just relax around the idea that all I have to do, the only thing transformation means, is becoming what that caterpillar was designed to become, which was a butterfly in this case.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. Jacob, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for coming into the Facebook Live group, for being who you are, for writing these amazing books.
Thank you.
Really, truly, and for bringing the unique you to the world. Last question: if people want to work with you, we'll have it in the like comments. It's on the podcast. But do you do coaching? Like, just tell everybody what you do in case they feel a call
Okay.
to call you for that as well.
Well, yeah, thank you. You can just visit jacobnordby.com. There's a
Okay.
free journaling gift, not a podcast, a PDF download. Yeah, there, and it has some information about the guidance work that I do. But yeah, jacobnordby.com is probably the easiest place. The Institute for Creative Living.org is growing and exciting. So kind of either place.
Beautiful. All right. And thanks everyone for tuning in, everyone catching the replay. Check out the episode. It's awesome. And next week, same time, same place, we have Rob Schwartz, author of Your Soul's Plan. So shifting gears, talking about reincarnation and how your soul planned this lifetime for your learning and growth. Rob, I'm a huge fan of his work. So excited to have him here. So make sure you guys save the date, show up, and come and ask him lots of questions because he is definitely a wealth of knowledge. All right. So thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.